Unaware his wife was about to win a $1 billion deal, husband humiliated her, calling her ugly at a party in front of his family. What she did next crushed him. He didn't just disrespect her. In a crowded living room glowing with warm lights and fake smiles, he looked straight at his own wife, and stripped her dignity in front of everyone who already thought she wasn't good enough for him. That night, Elena Bennett stood near the edge of her husband's family gathering. Dressed simply, quietly, carrying the kind of soft presence most people overlook. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, she wasn't the type Mark's family liked to brag about, but she was there, standing with a heart full of love, until she heard laughter rising from the center of the room. Mark Bennett, her husband, was surrounded by relatives. Wine glasses lifted, admiration poured over him like he was the star of the night. Beside him, a blonde woman in a fitted dress placed her hand on his arm. Jenna, the colleague who needed a ride. The woman wearing the same gold charm bracelet Elena had seen lying on Mark's desk upstairs not long before. Someone joked about Elena's simple style. Another called her plain. Elena waited, just once, for her husband to defend her. Instead, Mark laughed harder than all of them. Then he pointed directly at her and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Style? Elena? Come on, she's the ugliest woman here." The room erupted. His family laughed. The mistress smiled, then glanced at Elena, curious about how much this woman could take. And Elena stood there, quiet, not weak, not broken, just unbearably silent. Because while Mark mocked her in public, he had no idea where she had been in the last 24 hours. He didn't know about the private boardroom, the cameras, the executives, the billion-dollar papers she had already signed on behalf of her company. He didn't know a public announcement would go out the next morning with her name all over it. He didn't know the power she now held in her hands and what she had already started setting in motion. And later, in front of many of the same people who laughed at her, Elena Bennett would make a move that would crush his pride, end his lies, and rewrite her life forever. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you listen without subscribing, it's like letting Elena stand alone in that room again. When you click that button, you stand with every underestimated woman ready for her comeback. Subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. The tension in the boardroom could be felt the moment Elena Bennett stepped inside. At 34, she carried an aura that silenced even the most confident executives. Her dark hair framed a face that was calm, intelligent, and unreadable. The large glass table was covered in documents, contracts, financial statements, projections, all pointing toward one reality. She was minutes away from finalizing a $1 billion acquisition. On paper, it was a deal between two global companies. In practice, it would place Elena among the most influential businesswomen of her generation. But no one outside this room knew. Not her husband, not his family, not even the people who pretended to care about her. Elena's hand hovered above the final page. Her expression was steady, but inside a quiet storm moved. She had spent years building toward this milestone. Years of late nights, hidden meetings, and strategic calls she took in hallways so Mark wouldn't overhear how important she had become. She wasn't born into wealth. She grew up in a modest home, raised by a single father who ran a small repair shop. When Elena was 16, he passed away suddenly, leaving behind a box of unpaid bills, a few tools, and a single note he wrote long before he died. "Your mind will take you further than your circumstances ever can." That note was now folded inside her wallet, creased, worn, but protected like a treasure. After his death, Elena worked every job she could find, waitressing, tutoring, filing documents at a small law firm. She put herself through school, graduated early, and joined an energy tech startup where her strategic thinking quickly stood out. When the founder retired unexpectedly, he gave her a small portion of shares, nothing dramatic at the time, but Elena's decisions caused those shares to multiply in value over the years. Her reputation grew quietly. Investors started asking for her by name. When a major corporation wanted to acquire the startup, she was the one they insisted sit at the negotiating table. That was how she ended up here today, leading the final signing on behalf of her company. Her husband, Mark Bennett, had once admired that drive. Mark, now 36, worked in mid-level management at a modest marketing firm. When they met, he was charming, handsome, and eager to impress. He liked telling people his girlfriend was the smart one. But as time went on and her career began to outpace his, admiration slowly turned into resentment. His voice echoed in her memory, sharp, dismissive, unforgettable. If you ever out-earn me, this marriage is done. Men need to feel superior. He had said it 2 years earlier, after she received a surprise promotion. He laughed as if it were a joke, but the coldness in his eyes told her it wasn't. That was the moment Elena learned to hide her victories. The pen in her hand trembled slightly as another memory surfaced. Mark accusing her of acting too smart around his family. Mark rolling his eyes whenever she mentioned work. Mark insisting that women should know their place when men were talking. Those comments had once hurt her deeply. Now they fueled her. She signed the final page with steady grace. It was done. The deal was sealed. She had just become the leading force behind a billion-dollar acquisition, one that would shift the future of renewable energy across the nation. The formal announcement and press conference would happen the next morning, but legally the power was already in her hands. A soft chime interrupted the triumphant silence. Elena glanced at her phone. A new message flashed across the screen. From Margaret Bennett, Mark's mother. Where's something that hides your imperfections tonight? The whole family will be there. Elena froze for a second. There it was again, the reminder of the role Mark's family expected her to play. Margaret was 62, sharp-tongued, and obsessed with physical beauty. She often compared Elena to the women she believed were appropriate for her son. She had once told Elena, "A wife should be pretty first, smart second." The message stabbed her with a familiar sting. Elena inhaled slowly to steady her breath. But this time, something inside her didn't break. Something hardened. She placed her phone face down on the polished table and whispered to herself, barely audible, "Tonight will be different." The executives congratulated her, shaking hands unaware of the emotional battlefield inside her. She smiled politely, but her thoughts drifted toward the evening ahead. A family gathering, Mark's family, where she already knew she would be picked apart, judged silently and made to feel small. Except she wasn't small anymore. Not here, not on paper, not in reality. As she gathered the documents and placed them into her briefcase, a sudden chill moved through her. Not cold, but instinct. A whisper of something coming, something that would shift everything in her life, both professionally and personally. She paused at the doorway, fingers gripping the handle. The screen of her phone lit up again. Another message appeared before she even picked it up. This one made her eyebrows narrow. It was from Mark, short, sharp, and familiar. "Be on time tonight. Don't make me look bad." A faint tremor of warning tightened her chest, and quietly, subtly, the next storm in her life began to form. The instant Elena stepped through the doorway of Mark's family home that evening, the air hit her like a slap. Sharp, cold, and heavy with judgment. The chandelier above glowed brightly, but the house itself felt dim, as if the warmth had been drained long ago. Voices echoed from the living room, polished and loud, like a family trained their whole lives to sound more important than they truly were. The Bennetts were wealthy in their own minds, not in their wallets. They lived in a nice but overstretched house, cared about reputation more than reality, and valued appearance and hierarchy above kindness. Every gathering felt like a competition. Every comment hit a knife. Elena had barely taken 2 steps inside when Margaret Bennett appeared at the bottom of the staircase. Her eyes scanned Elena from head to toe, not with concern but with inspection, like a jeweler checking for cracks in a stone. "There you are," Margaret said, her voice smooth yet icy. "I was worried you'd show up wearing something distracting." Elena kept her expression neutral. She was used to this. Margaret always spoke in ways that sounded polite, but carried deep insult underneath. Margaret had built her entire identity around beauty and social standing. She spent most of her life judging women, ranking them silently, and teaching her sons that appearance was currency. She raised Mark with a rule. A man's worth is measured by the beauty of the woman beside him. Mark absorbed it like air. "Everyone's already here," Margaret added. "Don't wander off. Tonight is important for Mark. Tomorrow's dinner is about his big pitch." Elena said nothing. She knew the truth. Mark's big pitch at work was nowhere near the scale of the deal she had closed, but she also knew this family would rather celebrate an illusion around Mark than a reality around her. She followed Margaret toward the living room, her steps slow, controlled. The closer they got, the louder the voices became. Mark's father, Richard Bennett, tall, gray-haired, and as blunt as a hammer, sat at the head of the long dining table that connected to the living room area. He was a retired salesman who lied about his income, inflated every story, and believed his sons deserved perfect wives. He often ranked female relatives aloud during dinners, comparing who had aged well and who let themselves go. His sons grew up watching that like it was normal conversation. Next to him sat Mark's younger sister, Danielle, 32, sharp-boned and hungry for social status. Danielle treated every family event like a stage and every person like a prop. "Elena," Danielle called suddenly, her smile too wide. "You made it. I thought maybe you were still getting ready." A small laugh rippled around the room, quiet but intentional. Before Elena could respond, Richard spoke without looking at her. "Mark isn't here yet. He said he hoped you wouldn't slow things down tonight." The words carried a sting, but Elena's face stayed calm. Inside, though, something twisted. Mark's text from earlier, "Don't make me look bad," echoed in her mind. Memories from the early years of their marriage drifted in. Her first Thanksgiving with the Bennetts. Margaret whispering loudly to an aunt, "She's kind, but Mark deserves someone stunning." Her first Christmas, Richard telling Mark, "You should have married that blonde girl from your gym. Remember her? Beautiful girl." Her first anniversary dinner with them. Danielle smirking as she said, "Elena has a sweet face, but she isn't the type men brag about." Each memory carved a quiet wound inside Elena, wounds she covered with patience. She had tried defending herself once, but Mark later told her she was too sensitive in embarrassing him. That was the night she learned silence was safer around them. Still, she walked deeper into the house and took a seat near the edge of the room. Conversations swirled around her, shallow, biting, full of invisible claws. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You should smile more tonight. People forgive plainness if the person looks cheerful." Elena's jaw tightened gently. Plainness, imperfections, distractions. These were the words Margaret used instead of insults. The meaning was the same, but Elena no longer felt small under them. Not today. Not after signing a deal worth $1 billion. Not after securing a future where none of these people would have any financial power over her. As she sat there, Danielle rose halfway from her chair, whispering to an aunt nearby. The aunt, a short woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned closer. Danielle spoke softly, but not softly enough. "I wonder if Mark told her about the other woman yet." The aunt gasped. Elena's heart stopped. Her fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. She didn't breathe, didn't blink. The room moved around her, unaware that one sentence had just cut through her world like a blade. A chill swept through her, but her face stayed controlled. She had suspected something. She had felt Mark pulling away, but hearing it confirmed, out loud, hit her in a way she wasn't prepared for. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Danielle's next words were quieter. But Elena caught them. "She'll find out soon enough. Tonight might be interesting." A cold shadow fell across Elena's thoughts. She suddenly understood. Tonight was not just a family gathering. Something was coming. Something sharp. Something cruel. And somewhere in this house, the truth about this other woman was already closer than Elena realized. Upstairs, the noise from the living room softened into a low, distant hum. Margaret had turned one of the spare bedrooms into a small home office for Mark, calling it his space whenever he visited. It was the only room in the house where he could shut the door and pretend the rest of the family didn't exist. Now that door slammed shut. The sharp sound cut through the hallway, and Elena, who had stepped away from the crowd to catch her breath, flinched. She had come upstairs under the excuse of freshening up, but really she needed space after hearing Danielle's words about the other woman. As she reached the top of the stairs, she heard Mark's low voice through the office door. Tense, urgent, wrong. "No, don't worry," he whispered into his phone. "She won't say anything. She never does." The sentence hit Elena harder than she expected. She never does. That was how he saw her, silent, harmless, predictable. Elena took a step closer, then another. Inside the office, Mark stood with his back to the door, one hand on his laptop, the other gripping his phone. His shoulders were stiff, his words hushed and clipped. "Yes, tonight," he said. "Just look perfect, okay? I'll handle the rest." Before Elena could gather the strength to speak, his laptop chimed. Mark panicked and spun the screen away from the doorway. The movement was too quick to be casual. It was the reflex of a man caught. That was when Elena stepped inside. "Oh," Mark said, jerking around. His eyes widened, then narrowed into annoyance. "Why are you sneaking in like that?" Elena kept her voice steady. "I called your name twice. I didn't hear you." He snapped his laptop closed so fast the lid slammed. "You always walk in at the wrong time." A strange silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. Elena's gaze drifted over the desk, searching for a hint, anything to explain the uneasiness crawling through her. Then she saw it. A delicate gold charm bracelet lay on top of a stack of papers. Small, elegant, expensive. Nothing like the jewelry she wore. A tiny heart-shaped locket dangled from it. Her breath faltered. She had seen that bracelet design before, months ago at Mark's gym. A beautiful woman wearing it. Tall, toned, long golden hair, striking green eyes. The woman had laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that made people turn and stare. Elena remembered watching Mark look at her for a moment too long. At the time, she brushed it off. Now the bracelet sat in her husband's home office at his parents' house. "Where did that come from?" Elena asked quietly. Mark's jaw tightened. "It's nothing. Don't touch it." She didn't. She just stared at it, then back at him. Mark moved quickly, sweeping the bracelet into a drawer. "Go get ready for the party," he said, tone hard, "and try not to make things awkward tonight. My family's excited about my presentation tomorrow." Awkward, a sterile word for a man hiding another woman's jewelry. Elena stepped back, giving him space, but her thoughts spun. Danielle's whisper replayed in her mind. I wonder if Mark told her about the other woman yet. Earlier, Elena wanted to believe Danielle was just stirring trouble. Now, the truth pressed closer, heavy and undeniable. She reached for the door handle. Before she could open it, Mark's phone vibrated. His body stiffened again. He snatched the phone so fast he didn't realize he angled the screen slightly toward her. For a split second, barely a breath, Elena saw the message preview. "I'll see you tonight. Don't let your wife embarrass you again." The heart at the end burned into her memory. Mark jabbed his thumb against the screen to hide it. Too late. "Elena," he snapped, "mind your own business." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her legs felt heavy, rooted to the floor as her heart pounded against her ribs. Everything Danielle said, everything Mark denied, everything she tried not to see, it was real. And tonight, whatever he planned with that woman, whatever the bracelet represented, would play out while she was standing under the same roof. She walked out of the office without another word. Mark didn't follow. As she moved back down the hallway toward the stairs, the sounds from the living room grew louder. Laughter, clinking glasses, music. The house suddenly felt colder, sharper, each shadow holding a secret. Downstairs, Margaret's polished voice floated up, full of pride and control. The night was far from over. The humiliation had only begun. And somewhere on the main floor of the house, the woman behind that bracelet was about to step straight into Elena's line of sight. When Elena returned to the main room of the Bennett family party, the noise hit her like a wave. Loud laughter, clinking glasses, music thumping too hard, and voices layered with judgment. Eyes turned toward her instantly, not with warmth, but with curiosity sharpened like blades. The room sparkled with decorations rented to look expensive. Crystal-style glasses, glossy tablecloths, a floral centerpiece Margaret insisted they could barely afford but needed for status. Underneath the shine, everything felt cold. Margaret approached first, as if she were the hostess of a grand ball. At 62, she moved with stiff elegance, chin high, surveying people instead of greeting them. Her eyes swept over Elena's dress before she even offered a word. "Oh," Margaret murmured, lips tightening, "I thought you'd wear something more flattering." "That color isn't kind to your skin tone." No hello, no welcome, just critique. Elena simply nodded. She had expected this. Margaret believed beauty was a woman's only true value, and she never hid her disappointment that her son didn't marry someone she could parade around. Before Elena could respond, Mark's aunt Rebecca appeared at her side. Rebecca was in her late 50s, in a sparkly dress and cloud of perfume. She smiled, but it was thin and insincere. "Elena, dear," Rebecca said, leaning closer, "you should try a brighter lipstick, something to bring life to your face. You look so tired." Another dagger disguised as advice. Elena kept her breathing steady. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Then Mark's cousin, Tyler, a 30-year-old who thought his minor position at a car dealership made him important, joined the circle. He wasn't subtle. "So," Tyler asked, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "still working that little job of yours?" Elena met his eyes calmly. "Yes." She didn't mention the billion-dollar contract she signed that morning. She didn't mention the company she now partly controlled. She didn't explain that, on paper, she had more leverage than everyone in this room combined. Tomorrow they would all know. Tomorrow her silence would become the sharpest weapon she ever carried. But tonight, she stayed quiet. Voices swarmed around her, each conversation full of fake charm and hidden comparison. Every Bennett had grown up trained to criticize, compare, and rank. A flash of memory pulled her back. Years earlier, during her first Bennett family party, she had stood alone in a hallway after Margaret called her pretty in an ordinary way. Elena slipped into the bathroom to breathe, but the moment she locked the door, tears fell. She cried quietly, tiny, painful sobs that came from feeling like she wasn't enough. She remembered sitting on the edge of the tub, staring at herself in the mirror, wondering if she would ever be accepted. Wondering if Mark would ever stand up for her. Wondering if love meant being constantly measured like clothing on a rack. She had wiped her tears just seconds before Mark knocked on the door, asking her why she was making a scene. The memory stung even now, but this time no tears came. This time she stood taller. Elena moved to an empty corner of the room to breathe. Even there she felt their eyes on her. Judging, measuring. It didn't break her anymore. It only reminded her how far she had come without their approval. Tomorrow her life would shift. Tomorrow none of this would matter. Still, Danielle's earlier whisper crawled back into her mind. I wonder if Mark told her about the other woman yet. Fear slid through her bones. She laced her fingers together to keep her hands steady. Suddenly, the music lowered slightly, and heads turned toward the entrance hallway. A murmur swept through the guests. Elena's back stiffened before she even turned. The door opened. Mark walked in, wearing a confident smile, shoulders back, acting like he was the star of the night. But it wasn't his posture that made Elena's stomach twist. It was the woman standing beside him. Tall, blonde, striking, wearing a fitted black dress. Wearing a gold charm bracelet on her wrist. The same bracelet Elena had just seen upstairs. Mark placed a hand on the woman's back. Too familiar, too comfortable, and announced casually, This is Jenna, a colleague who needed a ride. The room buzzed with interest, some relatives raising their brows, some glancing quickly at Elena. Jenna's eyes flicked to Elena with a small, knowing smile, soft but hiding something much deeper, a mix of curiosity and challenge. And in the space of a heartbeat, Elena understood one thing. Whatever humiliation was coming, this woman was part of it. The moment the guests circled around Mark, the energy in the room shifted like a sudden storm. Voices rose, glasses clinked louder, and every face turned toward him with admiration. Elena stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the man she once loved stand taller, laugh louder, and smile wider than he had in months, all while the blonde woman beside him glowed as if she belonged there. Jenna, the colleague he had brought as if it were nothing. The woman with the same bracelet Elena had seen in his office upstairs. Jenna didn't cling to Mark. Instead, she stood close enough to claim him, yet far enough to look innocent. Her eyes followed him with pride and secret satisfaction. Whenever he spoke, she tilted her head slightly, the way women do when they are charmed or in love. Most of the guests didn't notice the tension. They were too busy feeding Mark's ego. This presentation you're preparing at work, brilliant move, his uncle said loudly. Tomorrow's dinner will be your night. I knew you had potential all along, Margaret added quickly, as if she needed credit for his career. Mark soaked it in. Every compliment fueled him. He stood tall, chest out, one hand resting just behind Jenna's waist, close enough to guide her, far enough to pretend it meant nothing if anyone questioned it. Elena stayed quiet. She blended into the background the way she had trained herself to do in this house. But Jenna noticed her. Every few seconds, Jenna's sharp eyes cut toward Elena, studying her, as if trying to understand why Mark believed this woman would never leave. Then the first spark of humiliation flickered. Tyler, Mark's cousin, pointed toward Elena and joked, "Elena's always so simple. I guess some women don't try too hard." A few people laughed lightly, testing the waters. Elena held her breath. "Here it comes." Mark didn't defend her. He never did. But tonight, he went further. He laughed, loud, too loud. It wasn't his natural laugh. It was the laugh of a man performing for an audience, for a new woman. Jenna touched his arm gently. "Be nice," she whispered, smiling, but her eyes watched him carefully as if she wanted to see just how far he would go. Testing him, testing the marriage she hoped would break. Someone else chimed in. "Elena's style is understated." Another snickered. "Understated? She wears the same look every year." Mark smirked and glanced at Jenna, leaning closer to her than necessary, letting the crowd push him further. Then he said it, sharp, cruel, public. "Style? Elena? Come on, she's the ugliest woman here." The words dropped like a bomb. Silence swallowed the room for a heartbeat. Then laughter exploded. Louder, more careless than before. Some laughed because they agreed. Some laughed because they were afraid not to. Some laughed because the Bennetts were trained to treat cruelty as entertainment. Elena didn't laugh. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Her heart didn't shatter. It froze. Her face stayed calm, unreadable. Inside, though, something final snapped. A part of her that still believed this marriage could be saved turned to dust. Mark kept talking, feeding on the reaction. "I mean, look at her, standing there in that plain dress. No effort, no presence. Honestly, I don't know why she doesn't even try." The crowd roared again. Jenna didn't join in this time. Her smile faded. Her fingers slipped from Mark's arm. A trace of guilt or fear crossed her face. Not because she cared about Elena, but because she saw something in Elena's eyes she didn't expect. Not hurt, not tears, not panic. Silence. Cold, measuring silence. The kind of silence that made even Jenna take a small step back. Elena kept her gaze on Mark, her posture straight, her expression controlled. She looked like a woman observing a stranger, not a husband. A woman finally seeing clearly how small the person in front of her truly was. Her silence was more powerful than any slap, shout, or tear. Margaret rushed forward, trying to soften the moment. "Mark didn't mean it that way, Elena. You know how he jokes." Elena didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Mark laughed again, but this time the sound cracked. Something in her eyes unnerved him. For the first time in years, he felt smaller standing in front of her. She finally turned away, not slowly, not dramatically, but with quiet finality, as if a line had been drawn, and she knew she would never step back over it. Her heart was breaking, but her mind was waking up. She walked toward the far edge of the room where no one stood. Each step was steady, controlled, deliberate. Behind her, Mark's laughter died completely. Jenna's fingers nervously brushed the bracelet at her wrist. Something had shifted, something big, and deep inside Elena, beneath the hurt and the humiliation, a new thought appeared, small, sharp, unstoppable. This would be the last time they ever laughed at her like this. He didn't just disrespect her. He made sure the people who already thought she wasn't good enough finally had a reason to laugh. He thought she would break. He had no idea he just killed the last piece of her that still wanted him. Elena pushed the back door open so fast it slammed against the house, the sharp sound cutting through the night like a crack in glass. She stepped onto the patio, breath trembling, muscles tight, every nerve in her body buzzing with shock from Mark's public insult. The cool air wrapped around her, but it did nothing to calm the fire burning through her chest. Her vision pulsed, her ears rang, and for a moment she thought she might collapse under the weight of everything she had just endured. She gripped the edge of the wooden railing, grounding herself as the noise from inside faded into muffled echoes. The laughter, the mocking, the humiliation, it all crowded her mind like shadows trying to swallow her. Her heart didn't just hurt. Something inside her was cracking open. Slowly, the intensity softened, and the night grew quiet around her. The stillness gave space for a different kind of pain, one deeper than embarrassment or anger, the pain of remembering. Memories rushed through her like waves breaking. She saw herself sitting alone at a restaurant 2 years ago, dressed beautifully, waiting for Mark to arrive for their anniversary dinner. She had booked his favorite place. She waited for an hour before he finally sent a short text. "Busy, we'll do it next week." She remembered the way her hands shook as she folded the menu closed, forcing a smile at the waiter, pretending she wasn't hurt. Another memory surfaced, a backyard barbecue with Mark's coworkers. She had been excited, ready to support him, ready to show she was proud of him. But when she tried to join a discussion about a campaign idea, Mark placed his hand firmly on her shoulder and whispered sharply, without even looking at her, "Let the men talk." The shame she felt that day burned like a fresh wound even now. Another memory followed, standing in Mark's office as he introduced her to a coworker. "This is my wife," he said with an awkward laugh. "She's average, but she has a good heart." He didn't notice how her smile faltered. He never noticed anything that hurt her. And then the memory that felt like betrayal in its purest form. The night she secretly paid off his business debt. He had come home angry, blaming his boss, the economy, his bad luck, even hinting that her energy was holding him back. He never once blamed his own choices. She used her savings, money she had earned from quiet consulting jobs on the side. Mark never thanked her. He didn't even ask how the debt disappeared. He just assumed someone finally recognized his potential. Each memory linked to the next like a chain, proof that tonight was not an isolated cruelty, but the final blow in years of disrespect. Elena's breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied, her tears dried before they could fall. She wasn't breaking. She was changing. Through the reflection of the glass door, she caught a glimpse of movement inside. Curious, she stepped closer to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the frame. Mark stood with Jenna, his so-called colleague, near the drink table. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed for a married man. Jenna leaned in, whispering something. Mark chuckled softly, then said words that sliced through Elena like a blade. "She won't leave. She knows no one else would want her." Jenna giggled, brushing her hair back proudly, as if she had already taken Elena's place in his life. Elena didn't gasp, didn't cry, didn't flinch. She simply stilled. Her fingers loosened on the frame. Her shoulders straightened. Her heartbeat calmed into something cold and focused, like a flame dying and turning into stone. In that quiet moment, something inside her shut off completely. Not weakness, not fear, but the part of her that still believed he loved her. She turned away from the window slowly, her face unreadable, her eyes empty of the woman she had been minutes earlier. A new version of Elena was forming, quiet, calculating, and dangerously calm. And deep inside her, a plan, small but growing, took its first breath. She would not scream. She would not beg. She would not fight him on his family's turf. If he wanted a stage, she would choose a bigger one. Elena gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened under the passing streetlights. She pulled out of the Bennett family driveway with a speed she never used before. Her chest was tight, her breath sharp, her mind racing so fast it felt like it might tear apart. The humiliation, the bracelet, the phone message. Mark's voice whispering, "She won't leave." Jenna's smug smile, his family laughing. Each moment hit her like a fresh blow. The road ahead was almost empty. The night outside was silent, but inside her car, everything was loud. Every heartbeat, every memory, every shattered piece of her trust. Yet as the minutes passed, something unexpected began to happen. The intensity faded. The panic quieted. Her thoughts sharpened into calm, cold clarity. She wasn't driving aimlessly. She was heading toward her office, the one place untouched by Mark's influence, the one space where she held complete control. When she stepped inside the empty building, the soft hum of the security system greeted her. She swiped her access card, the door unlocked with a familiar click, and she walked through the quiet hallway, her heels tapping a steady rhythm. No shaking, no hesitation. Not anymore. She entered her office and closed the door gently. The space was bright, clean, and organized, a physical reflection of her mind when she wasn't under attack. Elena sat at her desk and opened her laptop. This wasn't the first time she suspected Mark of cheating. For months, she sensed something wrong. Changes in his routine, half-explained networking dinners, his phone always face down, sudden late nights that never matched his actual workload, but tonight had confirmed everything, and that was why she had planned ahead. The viewers didn't know it yet, not even Mark, but Elena had been preparing for this moment long before the humiliation at the party. Months ago, when she first sensed Mark's dishonesty, she began documenting everything. Strange receipts, unexplained charges, transferred funds, phone logs and call times, overheard conversations, and every disrespectful comment he made in public. She stored it all safely, backed up, time-stamped, organized. Tonight, she finally opened those folders. Her movements were controlled and precise. She dragged files into a secure drive, screenshots of messages she had glimpsed on his phone, voice memos of his condescending remarks. The bank notice revealing Mark used her credit without telling her. She had once co-signed a loan believing it was for home improvements, only to later discover it funded his failing side business. His little firm he bragged about to everyone. She uploaded every document into a folder labeled Final, Legal. Then she picked up her phone and messaged Lydia, her best friend and longtime confidant. Lydia was 35, a paralegal who had grown up with Elena and one of the few people she trusted completely. Within seconds, Lydia called. "Elena, are you okay? Your message scared me." Elena's voice was calm, level. "I'm done, Lydia." There was a small pause. Lydia understood instantly. "Are you sure?" Elena looked at the glowing computer screen, at the mountain of evidence, at the betrayal laid out in cold, hard facts. She thought of Mark's voice, mocking her. She thought of his family laughing. She thought of the way he touched Jenna, like Elena wasn't even there. "He taught me to be quiet," she said softly. "Now he'll learn to listen." Lydia exhaled, steady and protective. "I'll connect you to the lawyer. You remember Attorney Graves?" Elena nodded, even though Lydia couldn't see it. Graves was the lawyer she had quietly met once, months ago. Just in case. Efficient, sharp, and fiercely protective. Minutes later, a message pinged. It was from Attorney Graves. "Received all materials. Everything is ready. Do you want to serve the papers tonight or tomorrow?" Elena stared at the message, her heartbeat steady, her hands calm. Tomorrow. Tomorrow would hurt him the most. Tomorrow the Bennetts would see the truth. She didn't type the word. Her silence was the answer. Graves already knew what that meant. As the screen dimmed, another notification appeared at the top of her phone. A new message. From an unknown number. She opened it. "You don't know me, but I'm Jenna. I didn't know he would humiliate you like that. He told me your marriage was over and that you were using his name to get business deals. If you ever need proof of what he said about you, I have the messages." Elena's eyes narrowed. Her breath caught, but not from pain this time. From confirmation. Jenna had just handed her something priceless. Evidence from the other side of the affair. Elena saved the number under Jenna Proof, took a screenshot of the message, and dropped it into the same folder. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. Her plan was no longer just growing. It was taking shape. The flash of cameras exploded like lightning the moment Elena walked onto the stage. The late morning air inside the grand conference hall vibrated with reporters shouting her name, microphones rising toward her like a forest of steel. Executives in dark suits stood behind her, watching with respect, waiting for her to take her place at the center of the long glass table. This was not just another meeting. This was not just another contract. This was Elena Bennett's moment of power. The public signing and announcement of the $1 billion acquisition, a deal powerful enough to reshape an entire industry, a deal she built in silence while her husband mocked her, a deal she carried alone, through late nights, hidden meetings, and endless doubt. Flash, flash, flash. Each camera captured the version of Elena she had always known herself to be. Strong, sharp, controlled. Not the plain woman Mark and his family described. Not the average wife they pretended she was. The crowd settled, and the CEO of the partnering corporation stepped forward. A tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a deep voice, he addressed the room. Today marks a historic moment, and it could not have happened without the extraordinary vision and leadership of Elena Bennett. Applause thundered like a wave. Elena didn't blink. She didn't beam. Inside, her emotions surged like fire, but her face remained calm, still, untouchable. She took her seat at the table, pen in hand, the ceremonial copies of the documents laid out before her. These weren't the legal originals that had been signed in private the day before, but they were proof to the world, proof of every sacrifice she made, every insult she endured in silence. Every night she stayed up working while Mark belittled her achievements. This was why she had stayed quiet at the party. This was why she hadn't reacted to Mark's cruelty. This was why she had walked away instead of screaming. Because today, she would rise higher than any of them could have imagined. With a steady breath, she signed the final page. A billion-dollar future, sealed again, but this time, in front of the world. The hall erupted. Cheers, applause, flashing lights. Elena stood and shook hands with each executive, accepting their congratulations with measured grace. And miles away, in the home he still believed they shared, Mark Bennett stared at his phone in shock. He had woken up expecting control, expecting to feel superior after putting her in her place in front of his family. Instead, his phone buzzed with news alerts. Local businesswoman leads $1 billion energy tech acquisition. Meet Elena Bennett, the new power player in renewable energy. Who is the woman behind this historic deal? Mark's face drained of color. His hands shook. His breathing tightened. He clicked a video, and there she was, his wife, looking powerful and composed, surrounded by the most influential people in the industry. The same woman he had called the ugliest woman here just hours earlier. The same woman he assumed would never leave him. His heart pounded with a mix of fear, regret, and disbelief. Beside him, his phone buzzed again with a new message. It was from Jenna. "You didn't say she was this important. I can't be part of this mess." Mark typed quickly, "Jenna, wait." Before he could finish, another message appeared. "Don't contact me again." Then he saw it, the small word beneath her name, blocked. His chest tightened, not because Jenna left, but because the woman he expected to cling to him, the woman he dismissed and insulted, had become someone powerful enough to destroy him without raising her voice. He stood abruptly, knocking over a glass on the counter. Panic surged through him. If Elena was capable of something this massive, what else had she prepared? What else did she know? What else was she planning? He rushed to get dressed, hands shaking as he pulled on a suit. He needed to get to the formal dinner event his family had planned for that evening, the one where he was supposed to talk about his big pitch at work. He needed to do damage control fast. If Elena showed up there with this news, if she told anyone what he had done, his stomach twisted violently. He grabbed his keys and bolted for the door, his mind spinning, fear clawing at his throat. He had humiliated her publicly. Now she had the power to return that humiliation 1,000 times over. And she wasn't done. Not yet. Because as Elena left the press conference, her eyes calm and focused, her phone buzzed with a message from her lawyer. "Everything is ready for the final step. I'll meet you at the dinner tonight, as discussed." Elena looked at the message, then stepped into the waiting car. The storm she was about to unleash had only begun. The doors to the elegant dinner hall slammed open so hard that every head snapped toward the entrance. Mark Bennett rushed inside, chest heaving, tie crooked, fear shaking through his entire body. His eyes darted across the room, searching desperately, almost wildly for one face. Elena. The event was already in full motion. Lights dim, music soft, guests in formal wear. The Bennetts gathered proudly around the long table, ready to celebrate what they believed was Mark's big business pitch and up-and-coming success. But Mark knew this wasn't a normal night. Not anymore. Not after the world had learned exactly who his wife truly was. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the greetings thrown his way. "There you are, Mark," Margaret called, unaware of the storm inside her son. "We've been waiting for you. Your big speech—" "No," Mark muttered, voice cracking. "Where is she?" His sister Danielle frowned. "Who? Elena? Why? What's wrong with—" He spun around sharply. "Is she here or not?" His desperation drew whispers. Faces turned to each other. Something wasn't right. Something was breaking. Before anyone could answer, the room fell into silence. Because at that very moment, Elena walked in. She entered with calm, unhurried steps, dressed in an elegant black suit that wrapped around her like armor. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes steady. Behind her walked Attorney Graves, her lawyer, mid-40s, sharp eyes, posture commanding. The moment Graves stepped inside, it was clear he wasn't here for dinner. He was here for business. Serious business. The entire Bennett family fell silent, confusion mixing with unease. "Elena," Margaret forced a smile. "Why the serious entrance? This is Mark's night, dear." Elena didn't respond to her. She didn't respond to anyone. She stepped forward, her heels clicking like measured strikes on the polished floor. The room held its breath as she faced Mark, who looked as though his world was falling apart at her feet. "Elena," Mark whispered, voice trembling. "We need to talk. Please. I swear, I didn't—" She raised her hand. He stopped speaking instantly. Attorney Graves opened a folder, thick, heavy, prepared long before tonight. "Elena Bennett," Graves announced with clear authority, "wishes to address the family before dinner begins." Margaret blinked in confusion. "Address? Address what?" Elena reached into the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. She placed them on the table in front of Mark, quietly, calmly, mercilessly. Mark looked down, and his face turned white. They were divorce papers, served publicly, in front of everyone he had spent years trying to impress. Gasps echoed around the table. "What is this?" Richard barked, grabbing the top pages. His eyes scanned the evidence attached, screenshots of messages between Mark and Jenna, financial statements showing hidden spending, loan documents co-signed by Elena, proof the loan funded his failing side business, not their home, voice recordings of his insults and belittling comments, Jenna's own written message offering proof of his lies, everything. Elena spoke, her voice steady. "You said I wouldn't leave. You were wrong." The room froze. Mark's breathing hitched. "Elena, wait. Please, don't do this here." She held his gaze without blinking. "Here is exactly where this belongs." Danielle covered her mouth. Margaret stumbled back against a chair. Richard stared at his son with raw disgust. Near the entrance, Jenna, who had slipped into the hall unnoticed, hoping to quietly support Mark, stopped dead. She saw the lawyer. She saw the papers. She saw screenshots with her own name and words. She turned, panic flashing across her face. "Don't worry," Elena said without fully turning around, her voice cool. "You won't need to stay long." Jenna's cheeks flushed with shame. She spun and hurried out, her heels clicking in quick, guilty steps. Elena returned her attention to Mark. "You humiliated me in front of your family," she said. "I'm returning the favor, in front of yours." Mark dropped to his knees, the papers shaking in his hands. "Elena, please, I can change." "You already did," she replied, "into someone I no longer recognize." Attorney Graves stepped forward. "All evidence has been filed. Mr. Bennett, you'll receive court dates and further instructions. I recommend you read everything carefully before you respond." Margaret burst into tears. Richard stormed out of the room, face red with anger, not at Elena, but at the son who ruined the family's image. Danielle stared at Mark like he was a stranger. Elena turned away from him, her expression calm but final. She had crushed him, not with screams, not with revenge rumors, but with the truth he thought she would never use. As she walked out of the hall, her phone buzzed again. A new message. From the same number saved as Jenna Proof. "There's something else you need to know before this is over." Elena paused for just a moment. Something else. Something more. The final piece of the story was still waiting. The sound of a door slamming echoed through Mark Bennett's small rented apartment, so loud it bounced off the bare walls like a final announcement of his collapse. He stood alone in the dim living room, surrounded by scattered papers, unpaid bills, and the distant hum of a city that no longer cared who he was. The once confident man now shook as he stared at his phone, hoping desperately that Elena might respond. She didn't. She hadn't for weeks. Everything in his life had fallen apart since the night she served him divorce papers in front of his family. Outside his circle of chaos, Elena Bennett stood in her new apartment. Clean, bright, peaceful. The window stretched wide, letting soft morning light spill across the room. Plants stood neatly in corners. A new laptop rested on a simple wooden desk. Her favorite books lined the shelves. It wasn't luxury, it wasn't excessive, but it was hers, her space, her peace. She moved quietly through the apartment, watering a plant near the window, her expression calm, her posture relaxed. There were no voices criticizing her now, no mother-in-law judging her clothes, no cousin mocking her job, no husband belittling her existence. Just quiet, just air she could finally breathe. Her life had changed more in 3 weeks than in the last 3 years. The pieces connected now, every insult, every sacrifice, every late night at work while Mark rolled his eyes, and the clarity felt like freedom. After the dinner hall confrontation, she had moved out within days. Her new place was small but paid for with her own money, not a shared account. The lawyer had filed every document. Jenna's follow-up message, the something else she mentioned, turned out to be screenshots showing how Mark had tried to use Elena's name and connections to attract investors to his failing side business, while calling her boring and lucky to have him behind her back. Elena forwarded the messages to Graves, not out of spite, but to make the legal record complete. And while she rebuilt, Mark crumbled. News articles appeared everywhere. Mark Bennett loses support after wife's $1 billion deal. Investors pull out of Bennett's side venture, following misconduct allegations. Elena Bennett's leadership attracts new partnerships. The few small investors who had backed Mark's side company stepped away and moved to work with Elena's firm or its partners instead. They trusted her intelligence, her character, her record. They wanted nothing to do with a man exposed for financial dishonesty and emotional abuse. His employer at the marketing firm quietly moved him out of client-facing work. They didn't want their name attached to the scandal. His big pitch vanished before it ever made it to the boardroom. His family, desperate to protect their image, stepped away from him as well. Margaret stopped answering his calls. Richard told friends that Mark had lost his mind and ruined the Bennett name. Danielle deleted every photo that included him and pretended online that she had always supported Elena. He was alone, not because Elena left, but because his own actions finally had consequences. And the mistress? Jenna was photographed online with a new wealthy man only days after Elena's press conference. A real estate investor, according to the caption. She didn't hide. She didn't explain. She didn't care. One headline read, "Jenna Cole seen with real estate investor, moving on quickly." Mark had lost her too. Now all he had left were the apologies he posted online, long, emotional, and soaked in excuses. "I made mistakes. I didn't value my wife the way I should have. I regret everything. Please forgive me." People didn't believe him. People didn't care. People only cared about Elena, the woman he tried to break, who rose higher than he ever imagined. And today, Mark tried one last time. One last desperate message. Elena's phone buzzed on her table as she carried a stack of fresh documents to her small home office corner. She paused, looked at the screen, saw his name. Mark Bennett. One new message. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. She didn't feel the old hurt. She tapped the message open for a single glance. It was long, painfully long. Mark begged. He apologized. He claimed he still loved her. He said he didn't deserve her, but he wanted another chance. He wrote paragraphs of regret, fear, and loneliness. It ended with, "I know I can change. Just please talk to me. Please." Elena stared at the message for 3 quiet seconds. Then she pressed delete. Just like that. No hesitation. No second thought. Her past didn't control her anymore. She walked to her balcony, opened the door, and let the warm air hit her face. Somewhere deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, strength, self-worth. She didn't rise to prove Mark wrong. She rose because she finally realized her worth never needed his approval in the first place. Elena stepped back inside, ready to open a new document on her laptop. Plans for a scholarship fund in her father's name, a project to help young people like she once was, a new chapter, a new purpose. And just as she placed her phone down, a soft smile touched her lips. What waited for her next would be even brighter. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.
He kicked out his pregnant wife for secret lover, unaware she was heiress to $50 million fortune. Cry louder if you want. Collapse for all I care. Take your child and your misery somewhere else. You'll never burden me again. You mean nothing now? Leave. That was the venom her husband spat as she clutched her stomach in agony. While she begged for help, he slammed the door. Where there should have been comfort, there was cruelty. Where there should have been protection, there was betrayal. In her darkest moment, he abandoned her, believing he had ended her life with a single act of rejection. But what he failed to see was that the woman he cast out in pain would not stay broken. She would rise higher than he ever dreamed possible, and her return would dismantle everything he thought he had built. Those who are thrown away often return stronger, and sometimes the woman you thought was powerless becomes the one whose shadow you can never outrun. Before we begin, kindly subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how this touched you. The rain was pouring outside, splashing against the cracked pavement when Emily staggered out of the front door, clutching her swollen belly. Her body screamed in agony. Her contractions had started hours earlier. What she needed was comfort, the steady hand of her husband, Daniel, the man she had once believed would stand by her forever. Instead, she got venom. Daniel's face twisted with cold disgust as he pointed toward the door. "Don't you dare cry to me now! You wanted this baby, not me. I have a new life waiting, and you're not in it." Emily tried to steady herself, her tears mixing with the rain. "Daniel, please, at least call someone." "The baby," he cut her off with a sneer. "That child is your burden, not mine. Go scream in some hospital hallway if you must, but not here. I'm done being chained to your misery." Inside the house, Emily caught a glimpse of another figure standing behind him. Claire. The mistress. Dressed in a silk robe, her lips curved into a smug smile, as if she had already claimed the throne Emily had been thrown from. Claire's hand rested lightly on Daniel's arm, her eyes sharp with triumph. Emily's knees buckled as another wave of pain ripped through her. She stumbled, reaching for the doorframe for balance, but Daniel shoved her hand off. "Don't dirty my house anymore." "Get out!" The door slammed shut, leaving her outside in the storm, the contractions intensifying. Every fiber of her body ached, but what hurt more than the labor was the betrayal. Her heart broke in 1,000 pieces as she realized this wasn't just abandonment. It was war. She staggered down the street, rain soaking her clothes, headlights blinding her as cars rushed by. No one stopped. People glanced but hurried on. The world had turned its back just as Daniel had. She was utterly alone, her vision blurred, her breath ragged. I can't do this alone," she whispered. But she had no choice. The baby was coming, and the man who vowed to love her was now laughing in another woman's arms. Emily clenched her jaw, summoning the last of her strength. This was not the end. It was the brutal beginning of something far bigger. As another contraction doubled her over, Emily collapsed on the wet sidewalk. Just as headlights slowed and a stranger's voice shouted, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Emily blinked against the rain, the stranger's shadow hovering above her. A man in his late 50s crouched down, his umbrella shaking in the wind. His eyes were kind but nervous. "You're in labor," he muttered, glancing at her belly. "Where's your husband? Where's your family?" The question struck harder than the contractions. Emily shook her head weakly, rain dripping down her pale cheeks. No one. There's no one. The man's eyes darted to the cars speeding past. Horns blared as drivers craned their necks but kept moving. No one stopped. Nobody wanted to involve themselves in a woman's suffering. They were too busy, too cold, too afraid. He hesitated, then stood up. I'm sorry, miss. I can't. My wife's waiting. I'll call someone. He hurried away, his umbrella bobbing in the storm, leaving her trembling on the pavement. Emily let out a bitter laugh that turned into a sob. The kindness of strangers lasted no more than a flicker before it gave way to fear and excuses. Society was cruel in its indifference. She was a woman in labor, abandoned by her husband, mocked by his lover, and ignored by the very people whose eyes met hers and chose to look away. Another contraction tore through her body, forcing her to her knees. The wet asphalt pressed cold against her palms, and she thought of the warm house she had just been thrown out of. Daniel's face replayed in her mind, his cruel words echoing like poison. Die with your baby for all I care. Her chest tightened, but a spark of defiance ignited in her heart. She couldn't give him that satisfaction. She wouldn't let her child's first cry be silenced by his betrayal. Emily forced herself upright, gripping a lamppost for balance. Each step was agony, but she kept moving. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but her mind whispered one word over and over: survive. The rain drenched her hair, plastering it to her face. Her clothes clung to her body, heavy with water. People passed, glancing and then hurrying faster. A woman tugged her child away as if Emily were a disease. A young man muttered, "Crazy woman," under his breath, before disappearing into the night. Alone. So utterly alone. But deep inside, Emily made a promise to herself and to the life inside her. If no one will stand with me, I'll stand alone. If the world turns its back, I'll carve my own way forward. The contractions were closer now, sharper, more demanding. She knew she had little time left. The hospital was still blocks away. Could she make it? Her legs trembled, her body screamed, but she pushed forward into the storm. Each step became a declaration that she would not break. She might have been discarded, but she refused to be destroyed. As her vision darkened and her strength faltered, she collapsed once more, this time into the arms of a stranger who didn't walk away. A woman's voice cried out urgently, "Hold on, sweetheart! You're not alone anymore." Warmth. That was the first thing Emily felt when she came to, a sharp contrast to the storm that had nearly swallowed her. Her head rested against something soft, and a gentle hand smoothed the wet hair from her forehead. "Shh, you're safe now," a woman's voice murmured. Emily blinked, her vision clearing enough to see the face above her. A woman in her 40s, with kind brown eyes and worry etched across her features, leaned over her. She wore a nurse's jacket, though clearly off-duty, and her clothes were as drenched as Emily's. "You're going into labor, aren't you?" the woman asked, urgency lacing her tone. Emily nodded weakly, biting back a cry, as another contraction clenched her body. The woman glanced over her shoulder. "My husband's getting the car. We'll get you to the hospital. Just hold on for me, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Emily." "I'm Maria," the woman said firmly. "And I'm not leaving you. Do you understand? You're not alone anymore." Those words, simple, steady, were like a lifeline. For the first time that night, Emily let herself believe she might survive this. Within minutes, Maria's husband pulled up in an old sedan. He rushed out, holding an umbrella. "Come on, let's get her inside." Emily was carefully lifted into the back seat, her body trembling as the contractions grew sharper. Maria climbed in beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Breathe with me, Emily. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. You're doing so well." Emily clutched Maria's hand, tears streaming down her face, not just from pain, but from gratitude. This woman didn't know her. She had no reason to stop in the rain, to risk her own comfort for a stranger. And yet here she was, steady and strong, when everyone else had turned away. The drive to the hospital blurred into flashes of light and sound. Emily focused on Maria's voice, calm and encouraging, drowning out the storm outside and the storm inside her. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. Hold on. Your baby's waiting to meet you, and you're going to show that child just how fierce a mother can be." Something shifted inside Emily in that moment. For hours, she had felt broken, discarded like garbage. But Maria's words reminded her that she wasn't nothing. She was about to become a mother, and that was power in itself. The hospital lights came into view, glowing like a promise. Maria squeezed her hand. "See that? You made it. You're not done fighting yet, sweetheart. This is just the beginning." Emily exhaled shakily, her fear turning into fragile determination. If she could survive this night, she could survive anything. She would rise again, not just for herself, but for the tiny life inside her. As they wheeled her into the emergency room, Emily screamed in agony. Just as Daniel and Claire strolled past the hospital doors, laughing together, unaware of the storm about to turn on them. The delivery room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Emily's screams echoed against the white walls as the nurses worked quickly, guiding her through the storm of contractions. Hours passed like minutes, and at last, the room was filled with the piercing cry of new life. Her son. Tears streaked Emily's cheeks as the nurse laid the tiny, swaddled bundle against her chest. His face was red, his cries urgent, but when she whispered, "Mommy's here," his sobs softened. It was in that moment, weak, exhausted, but alive, that Emily realized she had been given a reason to fight. For him, she would endure anything. For him, she would rise. But not everyone in her world shared that joy. Days later, as Emily rested in her hospital bed, the door opened and in swept her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Callahan. Their expressions were cold, their footsteps sharp, their eyes scanning the room like inspectors rather than family. Her mother's lips pursed. "So it's true. You had the child." Emily straightened, clutching her baby closer. "Yes, Mom. His name is Noah." Her father's voice was flat, dripping with disdain. "You've brought shame to this family, Emily. First, marrying that man, and now this spectacle. Your husband has already moved on with someone respectable, and you're left clinging to a bastard child." The word hit like a slap. Emily's arms tightened protectively around her son. "Don't you dare call him that." Her mother stepped closer, her perfume suffocating. "We came with papers. Custody papers. Sign them, and we'll raise the child properly. You've proven you can't be trusted with responsibility." Emily's chest tightened, her heart pounding in disbelief. "You're asking me to give up my son?" Her father's gaze hardened. "No, Emily, we're telling you. The Callahan name carries weight. We won't let you ruin it further with your foolish choices. If you love this child, you'll do what's best and put him in our care. Sign the papers." Emily's hands shook as she looked down at Noah, his tiny fingers curling around hers. For years, she had been silent, obedient, the daughter molded by control and wealth. But something inside her had changed the night Daniel threw her out. The indifference of strangers, the compassion of Maria, the cry of her newborn. They had forged a strength she never knew she had. Her voice trembled but did not break. "No, he's mine. And I won't sign anything." Her mother's eyes flashed with fury. "You'll regret this rebellion, Emily. You're nothing without us. Nothing without our name, our money, our protection. Remember that." The words echoed like a curse as her parents turned and stormed out, leaving silence in their wake. Emily held Noah tighter, her tears falling onto his soft skin. For the first time, she felt the weight of her parents' betrayal. Not just their lack of love, but their willingness to strip her of everything, even her child. But what they didn't know was that someone else, someone long gone, had left behind a secret trust that would soon shatter every illusion of control the Callahans held over her. The nights were the hardest. Alone in a small rented room above a laundromat, Emily sat rocking Noah as the moonlight spilled across cracked walls. The cries came often, sometimes sharp with hunger, sometimes soft with restless dreams, but Emily welcomed them. Every cry was proof her son was alive, and every time she soothed him, she felt herself being reborn. Gone were the silks of her family home, the polished marble floors, and the cold stares of her parents. Gone was the suburban house where Daniel and Claire now flaunted their new life. All Emily had was a child's crib bought second-hand, a single dresser, and a heart stitched together with determination. And it was enough. Each morning, she rose before the sun, bundling Noah against her chest. She cleaned rooms at a roadside motel, took shifts at a diner, and accepted odd sewing jobs from neighbors. The work left her hands cracked and her back aching, but the sight of Noah's gummy smile at the end of the day made every sacrifice worth it. The people around her noticed. Mrs. Thompson, the old woman across the hall, would slip Emily bags of groceries with a wink. "You're stronger than you know, girl. Don't ever forget that." The diner manager, gruff and impatient with everyone else, made sure Emily got the shifts that paid the most tips. "Hardest worker I've seen in years," he muttered once, pretending not to care. Those acts of kindness, small but steady, began to rebuild her faith in humanity. For every cold shoulder she had known, there were hands willing to lift her just enough to keep going. Motherhood sharpened Emily's will like a blade. She learned how to stretch $1 until it screamed, how to soothe fevers with home remedies, how to smile at Noah when the world felt unbearably heavy. Each trial was no longer a burden. It was a lesson, a step toward becoming someone stronger than the broken girl who had once begged at Daniel's feet. Late one night, after Noah finally drifted to sleep, Emily sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. She thought of Daniel's laughter as he had closed the door on her. She thought of her parents' voices dripping with disdain. And for the first time, she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered to herself, "They don't own me anymore. Not Daniel, not Mother, not Father. This is my life now, and I'll build it with my own hands." Her reflection in the glass no longer looked like the fragile daughter or the humiliated wife. She looked like a survivor. Emily pressed a kiss to Noah's forehead and whispered, "We're going to be okay, my love." Better than okay. Someday, they'll see just how strong we've become. The very next day, a letter arrived. An official document stamped with the name of a law firm she didn't recognize. Inside lay the first whisper of the inheritance her deceased relative had left behind. The fortune that would one day change everything. The envelope sat heavy in Emily's hands. The letterhead bore the name Whitman and Cross Attorneys at Law, its seal pressed in deep navy wax. Her heart pounded as she tore it open, half afraid it was another cruel trick from her parents, another attempt to strip away what little she had left. But the words inside made her breath catch. "As per the last will and testament of your late great-uncle, Jonathan Callahan, you are named the sole beneficiary of his estate, valued at approximately $50 million. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the terms of the trust." Emily's hands trembled. Her great-uncle Jonathan, an eccentric recluse the family had barely spoken of, had been cold to most, but apparently not to her. He had seen something. He had left her not scraps, not pity, but power. Her first thought was Noah, his future, his safety. Her second was freedom. For years, Emily's parents had dangled money like chains, binding her in obedience. Daniel had once mocked her as nothing without him. But now, fate had shifted the balance. She didn't just have survival, she had a weapon. Still, she knew she couldn't rush. She had to be wise. A meeting was arranged at the lawyer's office downtown. The man who greeted her was tall, gray-haired, and calm-eyed. "Ms. Callahan," he said gently, shaking her hand. "My name is Mr. Whitman. I was your uncle's lawyer, and now I am your trustee. I promised him I would protect this inheritance until you were ready." Emily swallowed hard. "And you believe I'm ready?" Whitman studied her for a long moment. You've already proven it by surviving what should have broken you. Jonathan trusted your strength, and so will I. Something in his voice, steady, respectful, pierced through the years of belittlement she had endured. For once, someone wasn't trying to control her. He was offering guidance, not chains. Days later, word spread like wildfire. Her parents came knocking first. They arrived at her small apartment, disgust written on their faces. "So it's true," her mother hissed. "Jonathan left you the estate. Preposterous. That money belongs to the family. Sign it over at once." Her father's tone was colder, but his eyes gleamed with greed. "You're too inexperienced to handle such responsibility, Emily. We'll manage it properly. Hand it over before you embarrass us further." Once, their commands would have crushed her. But now, holding Noah in her arms, Emily felt no fear, only resolve. "No," she said simply. Her father's jaw tightened. "Do you realize what you're saying?" "I do," Emily replied, her voice steady as steel. "I'm saying you don't control me anymore. Not my life, not my child, and certainly not my future. Leave!" Her parents sputtered with outrage, but Emily shut the door in their faces before their venom could spill further. For the first time in her life, she had chosen herself. But even as Emily drew strength from her rejection of their control, Daniel was busy flaunting his new life with Claire, mocking Emily publicly, never suspecting that the woman he discarded would one day own the very empire he worshipped. Word spread quickly in their small town. Daniel and Claire whispered the story first, twisting it like a knife. At the grocery store, in the church pews, at the diner counter, everywhere Emily went, eyes followed her. Some were pitying, most were cruel. "That's the girl whose husband left her. Did you hear? He kicked her out while she was in labor. She must have done something terrible to deserve it. Now she's trying to raise a child on her own. Pathetic." Each murmur dug at her pride, but Emily learned to walk past them with her chin high. She couldn't waste energy on gossip when Noah's hungry cries and midnight fevers demanded her attention. Society had always loved to tear down women in pain. It was nothing new. Even when news of her inheritance leaked, the judgment didn't stop. If anything, it grew sharper. She doesn't deserve that money. She'll waste it, just like she wasted her marriage. Rich or poor, she's still the girl who got thrown out. Emily said nothing. She let them talk. For every whisper behind her back, she poured herself deeper into building a foundation for her and Noah. With Whitman's guidance, she began to take small steps into the business world. She learned about the trust, investments, and real estate tied to her uncle's fortune. She didn't announce her wealth. She didn't flaunt it. She worked silently, absorbing every detail, every lesson. At home, her strength showed in quieter ways. Noah grew, his tiny steps becoming bold, his laughter filling their modest rooms. Each time he ran to her with open arms, Emily felt her resilience sharpen. He was her reason to endure the judgment, her proof that love could exist even after betrayal. Meanwhile, Daniel and Claire flaunted their perfect marriage in public. They posed at galas, posted smiling pictures, and whispered in corners about how much better life was without Emily dragging him down. To the world, they seemed untouchable. But Emily saw the cracks. At one gala she attended, quietly as an heiress in disguise, she caught Claire whispering to another man, her smile just a little too intimate. Daniel, drunk with arrogance, didn't notice. He only saw himself reflected in the admiration of others. Emily said nothing. She didn't need to. Patience was her weapon now. Society could mock her. Daniel could flaunt his hollow happiness. Claire could preen in her borrowed glory. Emily endured it all in silence, knowing that endurance wasn't weakness. It was preparation. Because sometimes the greatest strength is not in shouting back, but in waiting for the moment when truth reveals itself. And that moment drew closer when Daniel's arrogance reached its peak. Mocking Emily publicly in a cruel spectacle that would leave the entire town watching her humiliation. unaware that she was the one holding the ultimate card. The town's annual charity banquet was the event of the season, a glittering night where the wealthy paraded their fortunes and the less fortunate gawked at the spectacle. Emily had no intention of attending, but Whitman insisted. "Appearances matter," he reminded her. "Your uncle's estate has placed you among the city's elite, whether you like it or not. Best they see you on your own terms." So Emily came, wearing a simple black dress. She didn't sparkle like the others, didn't drape herself in jewels, yet heads turned anyway. There was something about her presence now, calm, steady, untouchable. Daniel and Claire, however, arrived like royalty. Claire shimmered in a gold gown, her fingers flashing with rings Daniel could barely afford. Daniel himself strutted in a tuxedo, his arm locked around her waist as if to show the world he had traded up. The whispers started immediately. "There's Daniel, finally rid of the dead weight. Claire looks stunning, doesn't she? And Emily? Poor thing. Look at her, sitting alone." Emily ignored the whispers. She sipped her water, watching quietly from her corner table. But Daniel wasn't content with silence. Halfway through the evening, he stood at the podium to give a toast. His voice carried through the grand hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, isn't life about second chances? About finding the right partner when you've wasted years with the wrong one?" The crowd chuckled, their laughter echoing like knives. Claire leaned against him, her smile polished. "To new beginnings," she purred into the microphone, her eyes flashing toward Emily. Daniel smirked, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on his ex-wife. "To leaving behind mistakes and building something better." The audience roared with approval. Glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, and all eyes turned to Emily, waiting for her reaction. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her glass slightly and took a sip, her expression unreadable. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. But deep inside, her resolve hardened. Daniel thought this was victory, public humiliation, the final nail in her coffin. What he didn't realize was that every cruel word only fueled the fire within her. Because Emily wasn't the same woman he had cast into the rain. She wasn't begging anymore. She wasn't powerless. She had patience, strategy, and a future bigger than his pride could ever imagine. As the banquet carried on, Emily slipped away early, unnoticed by most. The laughter followed her out the door, but she didn't crumble this time. She whispered to herself, steady and sure, "Enjoy your moment, Daniel. It's the last one you'll ever have at my expense." What Daniel and Claire didn't know was that Emily had already begun moving her inheritance strategically, acquiring quiet shares in the very company Daniel's career depended on. Soon, their mockery would turn into horror. Emily had learned something from her years of humiliation. The most dangerous strength was the one hidden in silence. She didn't rush to confront Daniel, didn't throw her fortune in his face. Instead, she built patiently, piece by piece, brick by brick. With Whitman's guidance, she began investing her inheritance. Not in flashy cars or sprawling mansions. Daniel and Claire could keep those. Emily bought power. First, she purchased shares in Callahan Industries, her family's proud legacy. Her parents had always assumed control was theirs alone. But the shares Jonathan left her gave her a quiet but significant stake. With every acquisition Whitman guided her through, her influence grew like roots spreading underground. Next, she looked to Daniel's career. He had joined a rising tech company, one he flaunted as proof of his success. He often bragged at parties, "We're going public in 3 years. I'll be a millionaire before you know it." Emily didn't just listen, she acted. Through silent shell accounts managed by Whitman, she began acquiring stock. She learned the board members' names, their priorities, their weaknesses. She attended meetings as a quiet observer. The heiress widow few took seriously. And she smiled, listening, waiting. At home, her life was humble but full. Noah, now a toddler, toddled into her arms after each long day, his laughter chasing away the shadows of the past. Emily drew strength from motherhood, but also from strategy. Her son gave her purpose. Her fortune gave her leverage. but patience gave her power. Daniel, meanwhile, strutted through life with arrogance unshaken. He spent freely, bragged loudly, and dismissed Emily as the ghost of his mistakes. Claire basked in the glow. Flashing diamonds she hinted Daniel had bought her, though in truth they were gifts she demanded from his dwindling accounts. The town saw only the surface. Daniel, the charmer. Claire, the beauty. Emily, the quiet shadow. But under the surface, the scales had already begun to shift. One evening, Emily sat with Whitman in his office, papers spread across the mahogany desk. "You're not just surviving anymore," he told her. "You're positioning yourself. Daniel doesn't see it, your parents don't see it, but you're building something much larger than any of them can imagine. Do you understand what this means?" Emily nodded slowly, her voice calm. "It means I don't have to fight them in the mud. I can wait. Because when they fall, they'll fall on their own, and I'll be there to make sure they never rise again." Her words surprised even herself. Once she had been the woman begging on her knees. Now she was a strategist, her silence sharper than any insult Daniel could throw. And cracks were already forming in Daniel's golden marriage, because while he paraded Claire as his prize, she had secrets of her own. Secrets that would soon begin to unravel everything. The cracks in Daniel's shiny marriage began as whispers, subtle, almost invisible to those who weren't looking. But Emily noticed. She always noticed. At first, it was Claire's laughter at parties, too loud, too intimate, when whispered in the ear of another man. Then it was the way she lingered on her phone late at night, the screen lighting up with messages she quickly tucked away. Daniel, drunk with pride and arrogance, brushed it off. He was too busy admiring himself in the mirror of society's applause. But karma never forgets. One evening, while Emily tucked Noah into bed, she received a message from a woman she barely knew. It was short and sharp. "You don't know me, but I thought you should see this. Claire isn't faithful. She's been meeting someone else. Check tonight's gala photos. You'll see." Emily didn't respond, but curiosity pushed her to look. Online, she found the pictures. Daniel stood grinning, glass raised in another self-congratulatory toast. But in the background of another shot, Claire leaned close to a well-dressed man, her hand on his chest, her lips dangerously near his ear. The town gossips noticed, too. "Did you see Claire with that banker? She's been spotted downtown, late dinners, no Daniel in sight." Maybe Daniel's not the only one who can trade up. The same voices that once mocked Emily now whispered about Daniel's humiliation. And Emily? She stayed silent, watching from the shadows. At home, Daniel began to unravel. His charm thinned into paranoia. "Where were you?" he demanded of Claire late at night, his voice slurred from whiskey. "Who were you texting?" Claire only smirked, her tone like poisoned honey. "Don't be ridiculous, darling. You're imagining things." But the lipstick on her collar told another story. So did the hotel bills Daniel couldn't explain away. For years, he had thrown venom at Emily, branding her as worthless, weak, disposable. Now he tasted his own medicine. The wife he had paraded as his triumph was slowly betraying him, and she didn't even try very hard to hide it. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply watched. Patience her armor, knowing that every fracture in Daniel's marriage was the echo of what he had once done to her. And still, she kept moving quietly, strengthening her position in business, building alliances, ensuring that when Daniel finally fell, she would not only witness it, she would control the stage on which it happened. And soon, that stage would arrive, because Daniel's company was heading into its most important board meeting yet, unaware that the woman he had once thrown into the rain now held the deciding vote. The Callahan estate loomed like a monument to cold power, columns stretching toward the sky, manicured lawns hiding years of whispered cruelty. Emily hadn't stepped foot inside since her parents had stormed out of her hospital room, demanding custody of Noah. Now, she returned not as a broken daughter, but as a woman carrying her own name, her own power. Whitman walked beside her, his presence steady. "Remember," he said softly, "you owe them nothing. Not explanation, not obedience, not forgiveness. Today, you draw the line." Inside, the air smelled the same as it always had, expensive polish masking rot. Her mother sat rigidly in an armchair, pearls gleaming at her throat, while her father stood near the fireplace, posture stiff, eyes sharp. "So," her father began, voice dripping with false civility, "the prodigal daughter returns. Come to your senses, have you?" Emily took a seat across from them, her hands folded calmly. "No, I came to tell you this ends today. Your control over me, your threats, your attempts to take my son, all of it." Her mother scoffed, her lips curling. "We raised you. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? By throwing away tradition, family, duty." "You didn't raise me," Emily said, her voice low but firm. "You trained me, molded me to be silent, obedient, useful. But you never loved me, and you will never touch my son." Her father's face darkened. "You think your money makes you powerful? Don't forget who made you, Emily." Something inside her snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. She met his glare without flinching. "You didn't make me. You tried to break me. But everything I am now, strong, free, unafraid, I built that in spite of you, not because of you." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Her parents weren't used to defiance, least of all from the daughter they had spent years silencing. Her mother's voice cracked like glass. "You'll regret this. When society turns its back, when that fortune crumbles, you'll crawl back to us." Emily stood, her expression calm, almost pitying. "No, Mother. The only thing I regret is ever believing your love was real." She turned toward the door, Whitman following. Behind her, her parents shouted, their voices echoing through the hollow mansion. But Emily didn't stop. Each step away felt like a weight lifting, chains falling one by one. Outside, she breathed deeply, the air sharp and free. For the first time, she was no longer their daughter, no longer bound by their name. She was Emily, Noah's mother, Jonathan's heir, her own woman. Whitman gave her a small nod. That was liberation, not from them, but from the lie they built around you. Emily smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with new fire. "And I'll never let anyone chain me again." But even as Emily broke free from her family, Daniel's empire was beginning to collapse, his arrogance crumbling under betrayal, debt, and the same whispers of judgment he once threw at her. Daniel had always believed himself untouchable. He walked into every room like the world owed him applause, like betrayal was a sport, and women were pawns. But power built on cruelty has cracks, and Daniel's cracks had grown into canyons. It began with Claire. Her late-night absences became impossible to ignore. Rumors swirled around town, whispers of her dinners with a wealthy banker, her trips to the city without Daniel. He demanded answers, but Claire only laughed. "You didn't mind cheating when it was with me, did you?" The words cut deeper than Daniel expected. For once, he was the one left questioning, doubting, burning with jealousy. His paranoia drove him to drink, his charm slipping into bitter rants at parties. Where he once held the spotlight, people now exchanged knowing looks behind his back. Then came the company blow. At a quarterly board meeting, Daniel proudly presented a risky expansion plan, only to watch it crumble in front of him. The majority, led silently by Emily's shares, voted against him. His allies shifted in their seats, avoiding his glare. Investors began to doubt him. For the first time, Daniel's golden tongue failed to save him. The humiliation spread fast. Hayes isn't as sharp as he thinks. Losing control of his own company, can you believe it? His wife's stepping out on him too. Karma, I suppose. Daniel stormed through the halls of his office, slamming doors, firing staff in bursts of rage. But anger couldn't stop the bleeding. His fortune thinned, his influence waned. And the man who once sneered at Emily's weakness found himself begging for support. One night, stumbling home drunk, Daniel confronted Claire. "Are you seeing him?" he demanded, fists clenched. Claire tilted her head, her smile sharp as glass. "And what if I am? What can you do about it? You're broke, Daniel. Pathetic. You couldn't even keep your company together. Why should I tie myself to a sinking ship?" The words shattered him. His trophy wife, his symbol of triumph, had reduced him to nothing with a single sentence. Meanwhile, Emily's silence grew louder. She didn't need to expose him. He was unraveling on his own. Every cruel word he had ever thrown at her now echoed back in his own life. Alone, mocked, betrayed. Daniel sat in his darkened house one evening, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. His reflection in the window looked hollow, desperate. He whispered the words he had once spat at Emily. "You're nothing." Only now he said them to himself. And the final blow was yet to come. Because soon the truth of his betrayal, Claire's infidelity, and Emily's hidden strength would explode in the public eye, leaving Daniel stripped of everything. The night of the annual Shareholders' Gala was meant to showcase Daniel's triumphs. He strode onto the stage in his polished tuxedo, forcing his usual confident grin. But the cracks in his life had grown too deep to hide. Whispers rippled through the crowd before he even spoke. "Did you hear about Claire? Apparently, she's been seen all over town with that banker. And Daniel's losing control of the company. Emily Callahan owns half of it now." The name made Daniel flinch. He tried to silence the noise with a booming speech, promising new growth and unshakable leadership. But midway through, the room stirred again, not because of him, but because the doors opened and Emily entered. Heads turned, murmurs swelled. She walked with calm grace, a navy gown flowing behind her, Whitman at her side. Unlike Daniel, she didn't need a spotlight. Her presence commanded the room. Daniel's voice faltered. "What is she—" The chairman stepped up, microphone in hand. "Tonight we welcome our majority shareholder, Ms. Emily Callahan." Applause thundered. Daniel's face burned crimson. Emily took the stage, her gaze steady, her voice clear. "This company deserves leadership built on integrity, not arrogance. For too long, decisions were made recklessly, for ego rather than vision. That ends tonight." Gasps spread through the audience. Cameras flashed. Daniel lunged toward her, his voice cracking. "You're lying! You're trying to ruin me!" But Emily didn't waver. She raised a folder, its pages spilling evidence gathered quietly with Whitman's help. Daniel's reckless spending, fraudulent contracts, even his misuse of company funds to shower Claire with luxuries. The board erupted. Investors hissed. Reporters scribbled furiously. And then came the final blow. Claire herself. Dressed in dazzling red, she sauntered to the stage, her smile sharp. "He's not lying about one thing," she purred into the microphone. "This man is a fraud and a fool. While he wasted his life chasing money, I found better." She slipped her arm through the banker's waiting hand, the entire room gasping. Daniel's world shattered. His wife had betrayed him publicly. His company had turned against him, and the woman he once discarded stood tall above him, untouchable. Security escorted him from the stage as Emily's voice rang out. "This is justice, not revenge." The truth always comes to light, and when it does, lies crumble under their own weight. The audience erupted in applause. Emily stood tall, her dignity restored, her power undeniable. Daniel, once the arrogant oppressor, left the gala broken, his marriage exposed, his career in ruins, his name a stain whispered in shame. And as Emily stepped down from the stage, holding her head high, she knew the final chapter awaited. Not in Daniel's destruction, but in her own freedom, dignity, and the life she would build beyond the shadows of betrayal. Morning sunlight spilled into Emily's home. A home she had chosen, not one imposed by her parents or shaped by Daniel's ego. The walls were painted in warm tones, laughter echoed through the rooms, and the air smelled of fresh coffee and Noah's crayons scattered across the floor. It wasn't a mansion like the Callahan estate. It wasn't filled with marble or chandeliers, but it was hers. Every corner, every color, every piece of furniture told the story of her survival, her choices, her freedom. Noah ran into the kitchen, his little feet pattering on the floor. "Mommy, look!" He held up a crayon drawing, a stick-figure family with a bright sun overhead. In the middle, a woman held hands with a little boy. Above her head, in shaky letters, he had written, "Mommy Strong." Tears pricked Emily's eyes, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of victory. She knelt down, hugging Noah tightly. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy is strong, and so are you." For years, Emily had lived under chains of her parents' control, of Daniel's cruelty, of society's judgment. But each betrayal, each humiliation, had forged her into something stronger. She had risen from the rain-soaked streets with nothing but her will, and now she stood as a leader, a mother, a woman who owned her dignity again. Daniel, meanwhile, had vanished into obscurity. Bankrupt, abandoned, mocked, he was a cautionary tale whispered at dinner tables. Claire, disgraced and exposed, found doors closing faster than she could knock. And Emily? She didn't waste a thought on them. Their downfall was their own doing. Her life was no longer defined by their shadows. Whitman visited often, bringing updates on her growing empire. But he never spoke as if she owed him. He spoke with respect as a trusted advisor, as her late uncle had intended. Jonathan's fortune hadn't been a gift. It had been a test, a trust placed in her hands to see if she would rise. And she had. One evening, Emily stood on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky. She thought of the girl she once was, the one sobbing in the rain, begging for mercy, discarded like nothing. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had reclaimed everything that mattered. Her voice, her freedom, her dignity. She whispered into the wind, as if speaking to her uncle, to every stranger who had helped her, and to the shadows of the past. "Thank you for breaking me, because in breaking me, you taught me how to rebuild." And then, with Noah's laughter filling the air, Emily closed the door on the past forever. Sometimes, the ones who are humiliated rise with more power than their oppressors could ever imagine. Sometimes, the woman you cast into the rain becomes the storm that washes your name away. Emily was no longer the betrayed wife. She was the empowered leader. The cycle was broken,